Right now, if it starts raining, you check your phone. You see the little cloud icon, you grab an umbrella, and you go on with your day. Now, imagine it doesn't stop. Not for one day, not for three. For 11 days straight, the sky stays open and there is no forecast, no umbrella, and no roof that isn't made of branches and mud. This wasn't rare. Multi-day storm systems have been part of the human experience for as long as there's been weather to survive, and for most of that time, humans had almost no defense against it. So, what did they actually do? Not in the vague, they huddled in caves way documentaries love to say. Specifically, hour by hour. Because the answer says something uncomfortable about how thin the line has always been between comfort and collapse. Let's start with the obvious problem. Fire hates rain. For a species that depended on fire for warmth, cooking, and keeping predators at bay, a sustained downpour was an emergency. Green wood doesn't burn. Wet kindling doesn't catch. Archaeological sites with long-term rock shelter use, places like Sibutu Cave in South Africa, show clear evidence that early humans didn't just wait out storms passively. They stockpiled dry fuel in advance, tucked deep into shelters, away from dripping rock overhangs. Firekeeping during a multi-day storm wasn't a task, it was a full-time job, usually rotated between members of the group, because losing the fire in the middle of a storm could be a death sentence. Shelter mattered just as much as fire. Rock overhangs and caves were valuable real estate for exactly this reason, not because early humans loved the aesthetic, but because a dry floor was survival infrastructure. Excavated layers at sites like Blombos Cave show repeated long-term occupation, hearths built up in the same spots over and over. That's not a campsite. That's a shelter people returned to specifically because it worked when the weather turned. But shelter and fire only solve the physical problem. Multi-day rain creates a second one, quieter, and in some ways, harder. What do you do with all that time? A hunting and gathering lifestyle is built around motion. You track animals, you follow ripening plants, you move with the seasons. Rain doesn't just get you wet, it cancels the entire day's agenda. No tracking, no foraging, no long-distance travel across slick flooding terrain. For days at a time, an entire group could be stuck in one place, with nothing to hunt, nothing to gather, and nowhere to go. This is where something interesting happens. Anthropologists studying present-day hunter-gatherer groups, the Juhonashi of the Kalahari, the Hadza of Tanzania, have documented what happens during forced downtime like this. Rain, illness, injury. Activity doesn't stop, it just changes shape entirely. Tool maintenance goes up. People rehaft spears, resharpen scrapers, retie cordage that's been fraying for weeks but never had a slow day to fix. Ochre processing, grinding pigment for symbolic or practical use, spikes during exactly these idle stretches, based on residue patterns found at multiple Middle Stone Age sites. Rain, in other words, may have been one of the first forces that pushed early humans towards something we'd now call craft. And then there's the part nobody puts on a museum placard: boredom. Being trapped with the same 6 or 10 people in a damp shelter for over a week, with the fire hissing and the world outside reduced to a gray wall of noise, that's not a minor inconvenience, that's a pressure cooker. Group psychology research on isolated environments, polar expedition crews, submarine crews, even modern lockdown studies consistently finds the same pattern. Irritability spikes in the first few days. Then, if the group survives that friction, something shifts. People start talking more, not logistics, not plans, just talking. Memory, gossip, jokes, stories about people who aren't there. It's not hard to see the same mechanism at work 10,000 years earlier. A forced, dry, fire-lit stretch of nothing-to-do environment is exactly the kind of environment where storytelling becomes currency, where the person who can hold a group's attention for 20 minutes with a good story becomes briefly the most valuable person in the shelter. Some anthropologists argue that weather-forced downtime like this was a genuine incubator for oral tradition, not because anyone planned it that way, but because there was nothing else to do with the hours. And then there's the longer-term consequence, too, one that's easy to miss. Groups that got hit by the same seasonal rain patterns year after year didn't just endure it, they started predicting it. Certain star patterns, certain animal behaviors, certain plant cycles became markers. Rain is coming. Stock the fuel. Move to the shelter early. That's one of the quiet origins of calendar thinking. Long before anyone wrote a date down, someone in that shelter was keeping a mental tally of, last time the frogs got loud like this, the rain didn't stop for a week. That's not superstition, that's the first draft of a forecast. Some groups didn't just track the rain, they mythologized it. Storm gods, flood myths, ancestors punishing the living with weather, these show up independently across cultures that had zero contact with each other. That's usually a sign of something universal underneath the story. Humans needed an explanation for the one force that could trap them, starve them, and do it again next year without warning. A myth was, in its own way, a coping mechanism with better production value. So what did ancient humans actually do when it rained for days? They kept the fire alive like their lives depended on it because they did. They fixed what they had been putting off. They got annoyed with each other, and then they got closer. They told stories that outlived the storm by thousands of years. And some of them looked up, found a pattern, and quietly became the first person in their family to guess tomorrow's weather correctly. We still get restless on a rainy day. We still crave a story when we're stuck inside with nothing to do. That feeling didn't start with bad Wi-Fi and canceled plans. It's older than roofs. It's older than fire, probably. It's just been waiting every rainy afternoon for us to notice it's still in there.